Actually, you're moving up.
I'd just like to get a lot of room.
Here, we're moving you that way.
Okay.
Well, actually, I thought I was moving to the audience.
Toward the center.
Other side. We will be.
Yes, Mr. Blasbag.
No.
What's your wish?
No, it's in here.
It's funny. Oh, no. There's two. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore you. I didn't see you.
Has anyone seen what? Yeah, those things aren't cheap.
Wait a minute. Somebody. Oh, Richard.
Good choice.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Dick Welch has graciously asked me to run the meeting today. So tonight is January 18th, 2011, and it is a special budget workshop of the North Kingstown School Committee. Can we have the, I've called the meeting to order, and now I'd like everyone to rise for the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Lorraine, could you call the roll call?
Linda Avanzato. Belvoy Benson. Larry Cerisi. William Mudge.
Here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Joe Thompson.
Here.
Richard Welch.
Here.
Julia Held. Here.
For the clerk, please put in the record, Larry Cerisi is out on medical. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. All right, this is, we start off with unfinished business. Our discussion for tonight is the 2011-2012 school budget and the superintendent's recommended proposal for the same years. Dr. Thornton has asked that we take the first part of this meeting to allow him to do his presentation. So I would suggest that we all go out and sit in the audience, and so that we'll have a better view, and then we can come back up here after he's done for discussion.
Thank you.
Is he using that or?
Good evening, and I promise to be succinct and get you through to the place where you can start your budget deliberations. But prior to that, I thought it important to give you the full version, if you will, of the comments I gave the town council last week. So with that, the three focus areas for this budget conversation for me as we go forward, first is the educational direction. Second, the variables we consider with this budget process. And lastly, my request for 2012. In terms of the educational direction, I went to this slide last time with the council. I really want to focus on this, and I want you to think back to your high school days once again. Back in the day, it was about the bell curve. We had Algebra 2. We had a class for 45 minutes. Some kids got A's, some got B's, C's, D's, etc. What I'm telling you now is the Regents' work, our grading policy, the new regulations around graduation are all about proficiency. The bell curve has been eliminated. It's now a bar of proficiency, whether you get a 1, 2, or 3, etc., or 4. What I'm saying is now the days of the folks on the lower bell curve getting the jobs in the armed forces are gone. Today, even jobs in the armed forces require proficiency. Time, the last bullet, is the variable. Time used to be a constant. It was X time, algebra, that was it. Time must now be a variable. We must give some kids more time. I want you to keep that in mind. That's one of the premises for some of my budget conversations with you. Once again, the paradigm shift, all kids to be proficient. We must give kids more time. The question I always ask is, what can we do in schools to increase the student proficiency? The challenge is we have to build a system, a way to measure how we are moving towards proficiency. And second, give kids the supports they need to get proficient. And on the left column, we have what I would say is in place. We have something called Ames Web. It's a pulse check of an assessment where we can see how kids are doing along the way. We started that 2 years ago. We're still moving forward with our schools adopting Ames Web. We also have, you might have heard someone mention tonight, NWEA. 3 times a year, we take a check or a progress monitor on kids in ELA and math. And that gives us predictive value. Think of it this way. Kneecap is an autopsy. NEWA is a physical. We want more physicals in our assessment world. And budgetarily, I will pose to you some pieces that go with this. On the right side are things we're going to talk about now in the spring. The first one's a grading policy. You'll hear more about that with Dr. Rogier this spring. We're trying to give more consistency around how we look at grades and students. Second, the ARC, or Academic Resource Center. I will talk later about that. We're trying to now not invite kids after school if they need support. We're actually saying you need to come. You're mandated to come. The difference is, in the old paradigm, if you didn't do well, you could go after school to see a teacher. Now we're saying you may, in certain cases, be mandated after school or in some other venue. Maybe it's a Saturday program. We want kids to be proficient, and we're going to take steps to get them there, be it a grading policy, be it money in the budget. I'll talk later about the late bus system and also an extended school day. So there are all kinds of ways we're looking at trying to get kids to proficiency. This one slide is just an example of what we're talking about with pulse checks. I think I showed you that last Monday, so I'm going to go off that. Commissioner Gist came tonight. You don't see what the hours are. Just know this. Dr. Roger and I had to sign a contract, if you will, with the state about Race to the Top. These arrows represent subgroups we must bring up or reduce, actually, in half. For example, we have students in IEPs. Right now, the gap might be 30 points from a regular ed student to an IEP student. We must cut that gap to 15 in 4 years per Race to the Top. What I'm saying is, business as usual won't get this done. We must profoundly change how we deliver instruction to kids and how we support kids when they're not getting it. That's the big shift. Regents regs, you heard about that tonight, so I won't go into more depth on that. The grading policy, you'll hear more about this in the spring. It ties into this work with the budget, so I want you to hear about it quickly. The idea is a consistent and fair reporting structure, a focus on students completing work to proficiency. So you're going to hear a lot about that this spring. Currently, someone asked me today, can you email me the current grading policy we have, Dr. Thornton? I said, well, we have a homework policy. We have a policy on attendance. We have no grading policy, as most districts do not. So that's a real stunning revelation when you look at districts. The variables for the budget. Enrollment, the first bar indicates the historical from 2000 to 2010. You can see it's, for the most part, flat. As you heard last week, we are trending down. And the slide I want to really focus on is this one. We're proposing or reporting possibly 124 less students. As I mentioned last week to you, that does not necessarily mean you can reduce teachers because it's not a one-to-one correlation. For example, 30 less projected at the high school. Out of 450 some odd classes, that's not a lot of students. You're not really reducing sections, if you will. They all don't reside in the same location. At the middle level, 41 less at 2 middle schools over 13 teams. Once again, the same conversation. And elementary, 53 less students over 5 elementaries and 5 grades. So what I'm telling you is, over the past 2 years, we had the luxury of cutting some FTEs to bring up class sizes from 12, maybe to 18 in grade 3, et cetera. Next year, looking at the numbers, I can move some teachers around in buildings or grade levels. There's no real place to make a reduction, I will tell you at this point. I can show you those numbers as we go forward. This sheet I showed you last week to once again illustrate that. That's a screenshot from Hamilton when we reconfigured. Once again, on the right column on the end, you can see the class sizes of 18, 23, 26. My point is, whether you have 105 kids in grade 3 or 103, it's the same 4 sections, same 4 teachers. So I want folks to be cognizant of that. It's not a one-to-one. Healthcare is a big piece, a big variable on our mind. If we just project out 12% growth for the next 5 years, a family plan will go from approximately $16,000 to $26,000 in 5 years. So every person we have on the rolls in healthcare truly matters. It'll matter more and more every year. That's just the current trend. Some of you may know we're part of a healthcare group called GHGRI. We share costs with other districts. We're also self-insured. Currently, we have a 20% copay for the teachers and administration, 25% for new admin hires. Our new teacher contract went from 12 to 20%, and that 20% is of the real year number. This year's actual healthcare number. In the first year, we received approximately $350 over the old contract. This chart, I just want to illustrate to you how the district is getting a little younger. If you look at from the top, the gray, the tan going down counterclockwise, 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, and 10 to 15 years, most of our teachers are on the newer career track, if you will, than the veterans. And while it's not a one-to-one correlation, as the district does get younger, there are some thoughts to how you may have some lesser draws on the system on health care, for example. So it's something to consider. As you know, last year we had an early retirement incentive. 10 folks took us up on it last year. 7 more to finish the process are retiring this year. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go forward on this. The teacher contract, just one general comment for you. As you know, we did achieve a 0% in the first year, a 1% and a 1%. Healthcare went to 20%. So in general terms, we did save $1 million over the old contract. Now, contrary to popular belief, that does not mean there's $1 million in our pocket. It's $1 million we wouldn't have to spend if the old contract was still in force. In the first year, it would change year to year. I just want to give you the first year illustration. State and federal funding, I talked about that, I think, with you at length, just to review. This next year, as discussed, is the year federal money is no longer available. Call it ARA, SF, SF, Obama money, it all stops. The state funding formula, we have a formula, but the Assembly has not enacted the formula yet. If they enact it, it'll cost the state several $1 million to do so. If they do, North Kingstown will gain a bit. We're not one of the districts going backwards. We go forward just a small bit. That's good news for us. We do hear some rumors of 5% reductions at the state level. At this point, we can't confirm that, but that's something we hear. And we've talked for a couple of years now about fund balance. I'm telling you, as of the new year, we're looking at approximately $2 million in fund balance, and that was largely attained by spending the federal money and keeping our funds as the year ended. We had talked about how, we know in the year 2012 the federal money goes away. Some districts don't even have a fund balance, and they're in a tough situation. I'm proposing to you we deploy some fund balance to get through this 2012 year. Creating a structural deficit, which that is never a good thing to do, but I believe in certain times when it's raining out, which I think it is in 2012, you have to do something like that to get through. Someone had asked me last week in town council, why not deploy the whole fund balance, all $2 million? Well, to me, if you do that, then you're out of the game for 2013. So I believe we should have a conversation about deploying some fund balance towards the budget. You can certainly have a conversation of how much that would be. The ARA money, just so you know, it's quite an education when you break it down. There are different kinds of ARA money, or stabilization money as they call it. Some is general education. Some was special education. Some was preschool. Some was Title II. Put it all together, that's a substantial amount of money that helped us. But now that is all off the books, if you will, as you go forward. So, as you know from your past work on the school committee, you can't, put preschool money in another bucket of money, if you will. You have to spend it in the appropriate place where it resides. But all in, if you add it all up, you can see 886, 880. That's a significant amount of money the Fed gave North Kingstown to get through this difficult past year. So that's off the books now, going forward. Pension, we're looking at a 17% increase, and that's with what's called a smoothing. As you may have read in the Journal a few months back, the state had hoped to get an 8% gain, if you will, in the market with the money. It didn't come in that way, as you know. By averaging out or smoothing the hit, we're still going up 17% next year. We get that from a yearly communication from the state. Our letter came in this year on 9/22. That's how we operate based on what the state tells us to budget. I'm not going to read all this to you. They're in fine font, and I'll just tell you a couple of them. Essentially, the enrollment we're looking at is essentially a 4250. I went over that with you. The state revenue, currently we're modeling at flat. Special revenues or restricted funds, right now we have estimates only for you. For example, Title I, Title II, Title III, we get those numbers May, June. I can give you in a budgeted historical numbers for you, which we think we'll get. It's our best estimate at this point in time. 84% of the school operating budgets are personnel related. Salary 60%, 24% benefits. That's really the lion's share of what we do here. We have personnel. Healthcare, we're modeling in a 13% increase. Dental, a 5% increase based on what we're hearing. As I mentioned, retirement, 17%. Special education placements are looking to maybe tick up slightly. For the past 2 years, they've gone down a bit. Maybe now what we're reporting, it might go back up.
Sorry. I heard some gentleman in the meeting tonight talking about 50% was salaries and benefits.
Yeah, I can tell you. We can certainly talk later, have to break it out for you. Right now, we have 84%. Most of our operation is a people business. We hire teachers and paras and janitors, and that's.
The question is the 84%?
Okay. My budget. I gave you a sheet in budget sub, and I'll email this PowerPoint to all of you again so you can see it. These are my proposed adds to you for the committee to consider over the next month or so. I put them all on one sheet so you could have them all. And you actually have a sheet from Ned as well that shows you these, but I want to just kind of go through them quickly. I mentioned the first one last time about social workers, so I won't belabor that. I'll just tell you I believe we are staffed in social workers, and I can make the case for that as we go forward this month. Second, I need a para at Stony Lane. I have a one-on-one coming online at Stony Lane with a young student. We'll need a one-on-one. We know that now. I'm looking to add a .2 reading at DNS. We're always trying to make sure, are the kids getting the reading support they need at the schools? And last year we added, I believe, 2.6 reading people, but I believe still I'm a .2 shy of getting the job done, so that's my proposal to you. Quinnesset has a different makeup this year, and right now I have 2 large elementaries with 2 clerks, 2 small L's with 1 clerk, and I have Quinnesset in the middle. They currently have 1. In all honesty, they were looking for 2. I'm going up to 1.5 in my proposal to you. So that's what I believe it merits. DMS, they're looking for 1 more paraprofessional. I believe it has merit for a conversation. We can talk about that at a future time as we go forward. Extended school day in the ARC. That's that proficiency conversation, that bell curve slide. What I'm asking is, right now we have around $13,000 for after school time with teachers with kids. I want to raise that to $40,000. I want to go Monday through Thursday. Kids need support in ELA, math, history, science. Have someone there to help them and dedicated to that process. That's my proposal to you. How is that funded, you might ask? We pay an hourly rate of $22.50 an hour for teachers to work with the students per contract. So that's my thought on that. Going hand in hand with that, I believe if I'm mandating kids to be at the school through a grading policy, through my last conversation on the bell curve slide, I feel obligated to bring them home, if you will, on a bus. Our current late bus system does not cut it. For 10 years now, before my time, I've heard the stories. It comes an hour and 15 minutes after it's needed. As you can imagine, middle or high school kids sometimes might have other things going on if they're out alone for an hour and 15 minutes after hours around the facilities. So I believe they should come in a timely manner. I know talking to a couple of you, you had asked, are there other ways to get there? Can we be more efficient with our bus system? We can certainly explore that and bring forward John Horan to talk to you about what we currently run. But in the current modeling, I approximately need that number of 100,000 to get the buses where I need them. But you can certainly, test that theory. Common Core. You heard Commissioner Gist talk about the Common Core standards. The Race to the Top money will train our leaders. say 4 or 5 teachers in Hamilton, 4 or 5 teachers in Quidnesset, et cetera, it won't train every teacher in the district. I have around 380 teachers. Ryder said that's our lift. So to me, I need some dollars to get that done. So in this model, I have approximately 6 hours per teacher to give them a ramp up in the Common Core. That's one way to get there. You may want to reduce that and say do it another way, Dr. Thornton, and I can consider that too, but that's my thought going in to have a conversation about. Careers, I mentioned to the subcommittee today, a couple things about the career program at the high school. We have internships where kids go out in the community. A couple problems with that program. The first one was we, through some digging with Dr. Kemmerer, they learned the students weren't all fully scheduled. That was a problem. We learned that the programs weren't all properly BCI'd, if you will. So we want to clean it up. I believe once we clean it up and look at the 75 some odd students, some kids will need to be scheduled somewhere because currently they are not. I'm looking for a .2. I'm putting in careers as a placeholder, as a place they'd likely go. Speech. Everybody shows you all the hour money, all that money, 886. Out of that, many districts, and NK is not alone, we had staff in there for a couple of years because districts couldn't afford all the staff they were carrying, a structural deficit. We, over the past couple of years, pulled out all of our staff out of the hour money, but the process closed out. I still had a .7 speech I could not pull out of the grant. So going into next year, if I don't increase funding in speech, I'm short of .7 because the hour is not there next year. So that's kind of out there. And paras, I'm looking to increase 2 paras by 1 hour each, and that's simply looking with the principle of the staffing model of what the kids currently have over there, the kids and the teachers and what they need. I believe it's worth a conversation about increasing 1 hour for each. And social worker, a quick slide. That just shows you a comparison of like districts in population, number of social workers. Prior to the current population we had coming online, I believe we were low, but we made do. Given the last 6-8 months of history I've been hearing, I believe we can no longer afford to do this. So I'm looking to propose the 2 you saw in the first slide. The budget format, really quick on this. Last year the committee asked, I'll call it the Providence hybrid model. They wanted something like Providence. We kind of worked through it, so we hope to give you that in your budget book this year. Someone last year asked for personnel by position, by class code. We did that. Also, I'll call it a full run, if you will. In the back of the book, you have a Munis run, that small print, so we put that in the packet. And also, last year, someone asked, I think it was Mr. Mudge, it was athletics was nowhere in the budget. You go ahead and break it down to the level of extracurricular activities and it stopped right there. So I know he said, well, how about athletics? It's inside of extracurricular. So now we broke it out below extracurricular. You'll see athletics. You can break it out and see the difference. That was something I know is in my mind from last year. The budget really has 3 areas: program, location, and function. Program, the main areas of focus of spending, like regular ed, special ed. Location, where's it assigned? Hamilton, Fishing Cove. And function, how we spend it, like athletics. That's kind of how the budget works. What drives the cost going forward? To me, obviously, hours of conversation, health costs, pension. Another point for you, we'll talk about it this month. State set-asides have changed again. And on one page in the budget book, Ned, what page is that in the budget book we see the change? I just wanted you to note that. We'll talk about it later.
The change which again?
From the state set-asides. They're there, then they're going, then they're back.
Page 13.
Page 13. So note that for later. Here's the quick story. A couple of years ago, the state said, we want you to spend the state money in different buckets: a vocational bucket, a technology bucket, a preschool bucket. So we'd assign people or things to these buckets as they're appropriate. We did that for 08-09, I believe. Now, this year, again, they're saying, don't do that anymore. It's all coming in one big bucket. Forget that. So on page 13, you'll see a large number, then a number missing a few $1 million for 2 years. Now it's back again. That's why this conversation, we'll talk about it more as we go forward, the state set-asides changed again, so you'll see money move on the ledger in 2 locations. And finally, my request to you for your consideration for the next month would be a 3.26 increase, 2% increase in support from the town, roughly, well, exactly actually, 43,420,838 to 44,289, 255. I'm proposing to you, you consider fund balance as a source of 1154791. And my last slide for you, just you probably can't see that too well, but I want to make the case from bottom to top. We have been, I think, pretty efficient in our budget increases from the town. In 08-09, we were minus 0.5%, excuse me. 09-10, a positive 1.6% increase. 10-11, a positive 0.3% increase. And this year, you see the big number? All districts have this big jump this year because the R is off the table now. So the R difference makes the number move, but essentially it's a much more pronounced gain. I just wanted to show you that historical four-year look. That's essentially it. I just wanted to kind of front-load you with my thoughts, and now we can certainly start deliberations on where you want to go with the budget. Want to go to the table and ask, or here? Or? Yeah, let's go up.
All right, why don't we take this we'll go up and down the table, and each person can ask one question. Obviously, that could trigger other questions, but then we'll give each person a chance to be able to respond to the most recent question. So, Dick, you want to go first?
Actually, I have to let someone else go. I'm not prepared to ask a question at this point in time. Thank you.
Julia, do you have a question you want to ask? No. Joe?
Well, all I wanted to ask was that 84% North Kingstown, or was it a state number? I couldn't read the thing, so I just needed to.
That's our state number. Mr. Draper, you want to add to that?
Yeah, our North Kingstown labor is about 84%.
Oh, NK is 84. Okay, thank you.
I think to clarify Mr. Thompson's question was that the comment that was made earlier tonight was of the monies that we spend, if you look at the Insight records and everything else, approximately 50%, I'd say approximately 50% is spent for what they call classroom instruction, it's like face-to-face. Then you have instruction support, which is library staff and so forth and so on. So I think that's what I think Mr. McGuinn was referring to today.
50%. Okay.
Okay. Which I think is an accurate number. Superintendent?
Yes, so there are several areas that are outside of the classroom: speech, psychologists, social workers.
Maintenance, operation.
Maintenance, administration.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that Jim McGuinn doesn't want to recognize is that while they're not strictly educational people, they are certainly important, and you can't do without these staff positions. It's nice to say that we're spending 50% of our budget on education, but you can't run a school without janitors and other people.
Yeah, I don't think Mr. McGuinn was suggesting that. It was a fact of life, that occurs. And as you look at these different, quote, categories, whether it's education support, whether it's maintenance and operation, each one of them has its own component that makes up the cost, and you have to look at them separately, basically, and make a decision, concerning, where your priorities are and where you make cuts.
Bill, did you have a question?
Well, I have more of some concerns than before getting into detailed questions is our deliberations for the budget. What is our intention in terms of providing a budget to the town council? And by that I mean, in the past I was very concerned that, we gave a number, period, and, we stuck with it, okay, type of thing through the end. But what concerned me was that I think we have an obligation, if we send a number to the town council, that, for example, doesn't agree with Dr. Thornton's budget, if you may, or if it requires a cut, I think we have a responsibility to identify what would be cut if we didn't get this budget. Would it be, building maintenance or whatever? So when we go forward with our budget, we should be, to my way of thinking, upfront with the public that if we don't get the $42 million that we're asking, whatever the $44 million was it, that if we don't get the 2%, that here is what's going to be cut from the school program. And I'm not sure that's a goal, but I think it should be. So there's no misunderstanding, for the 3-4 months that the council, February until May anyway, deliberates that. And if we do get the cut, then I think we're obligated to make the cuts with telling the parents up front in February that we're going to have to make. We shouldn't change them. We should be serious about the cuts, and if we don't get the money, we focus on those programs and we cut whatever we agree to. And I would hope if that's the case I would hope if that's not the case, but should that occur, and if Dr. Thornton's budget, we should reduce it by $200,000, or the town council, okay? Should that occur, we know, and the community knows right up front in February what's going to be lost if we don't get this revenue. And hopefully this brings out the community to support, the budget, I would hope. Okay, so I think that that's an important thing to do when we decide ultimately what our budget is going to be.
Dr. Thornton, did you want to respond, or Mr. Draper?
I have no response right now. I mean, if memory serves, last year, we did do something similar to that, where we actually gave the council a list, if you will, of things that would come offline. So that's something we can do.
Well, I think it's going to be a commitment that we're not playing games. We're not going to, unfortunately, and I'm not saying it happened, but if we say we're going to cut music, or art, or transportation, or X, Y, Z, then we need it. We're not going to change our mind.
Well,
so the community has an honest...
I would agree. I know going back to last year, I know some folks remember we had activities and sports on there. Being a sports person and a former coach, I appreciate sports, but I would cut hockey before a reading teacher any day.
Yeah, Doctor, you're absolutely, I understand that was your position, but that wasn't necessarily the school committee's position. And see, the school committee's got to fess up and say, we support the cuts that Dr. Thornton will recommend. So that kind of completes the process. Well,
Yeah, Dick, you have...
Yeah, Bill, in response to what we did last year, and of course, which I'm sure you're aware of, the town council has bottom line authority on our budget. And what we did last year is we showed them where there were possibilities of cuts in order to meet whatever they adjusted our bottom line to. But those cuts remain the property, if you will, or the charge of the school committee and not the town council. When we talked about that to the town council, we had a meeting, and the public came out in force and asked that the town council please fund our proposed budget without any cuts, which is exactly what they did. In past, I think some school committees, and I'm not talking about North Kingstown, has played the card of athletics being the first thing to go if they didn't get their budget. We didn't do that. And I think what we did was, through Dr. Thornton, took the approach that here's a list of things that would probably be the first things to go, but there had been no decision at that point in time because we didn't know where the town council was on the final budget.
Well, I understand that, and that's the thing we want to avoid. But we need the council needs to know up front if they're going to cut $1 million or $2 million or 10, whatever it is these are the programs that are going to be cut. There's nothing to be held behind, closed doors, okay, that the public should know what the consequences are right up front. But also what the school committee did last year, in my opinion, when they went to the council and they asked them for additional raise, the school committee never, told the public, or fessed up to the fact that they had $1.5 million surplus. So to go forward and say, I'm going to cut this X, Y, and Z if I don't get this money, and you're sitting on $1.5 million surplus, I don't think was very upfront with the community.
Well, I think actually to respond to that, if I could, I know, if memory serves, last year, Ms. Dolan did ask me if I could apply $300,000 of the surplus to last year's budget. My response was, I would not recommend that. I wait till 2012 when we have the federal money going away, and that's what I'm trying to follow through with now. This is the year to do that.
Well, I understand that, and it's full disclosure, and that's all I'm saying. I support that, so the community knows what the facts are, the money we're speaking about, and they know what the school committee's plans are going to be up front. And we shouldn't hold off anything, okay, with the community. If the council wants to cut our budget, again, they know what's going to be cut. It's going to be X, Y, and Z.
Dr. Thornton, today in the Budget Committee, you gave us a sheet that had 14 items on it, and which was, I don't want to call it your wish list, but I lack of a better word.
Those are all new items, if you will. From number 3 on, those are all proposed new additions.
And you talked about some of them tonight in your presentation. Has the rest of the committee received that list of 14?
I believe they have. It looks like this in the email.
The email, I didn't open it up today, if you said it today.
A few days back. If not, we can resend tomorrow. Mr. Draper, we can resend this tomorrow. We will. It just has on there pertinent things you'd want on one sheet of paper, has on the breakage number, has on my proposed additions. We can email it again. That'd be fine.
I'm having some problems with my computer. I'm not
Actually,
sure.
I can send mine down to
appreciate
someone
that.
if they want to see it. Pardon the writing, but you can have my copy.
We did no, what I have up here is not quite that.
We can resend, that's no problem.
Yeah, I'll email that in just a moment if you have access to email now.
Okay.
Get that out.
Because I think that helps out in discussing a lot of what Bill is discussing about what would be your priorities. And then eventually, if you could, while you've sent this out, you told us today in our budget meeting that it is not in priority order.
It is not.
So if maybe by the next meeting on the 25th, if we could have that either in priority order or your priority that it is beside it.
Okay.
Which then we vote on and support, I guess.
You see, this year different from last year, Bill. Excuse me, I didn't ask for it.
You're fine. Go ahead, Dave.
From last year is last year the council said to us, we want a budget that shows, what was it, a 0 and a -2. They gave us some direction. They didn't give us this year.
Budgets 0, 2, 1 and 2, or 0, 2 and cap. 0, 2 and cap. We give them 0 and 2. We didn't go to the cap.
I was going to say, was there a negative budget too?
No, the one at the cap model. We didn't even need to go there. The 0 and 2 is what we give them.
And if you remember at the joint meeting that we had, they just listened to Dr. Thornton's presentation. They gave us no direction other than where they saw themselves being in the budget, being short because of loss of revenue from registration and other issues. But they didn't give us any goal to hit, if you will.
Yeah, and I don't see that we've been given any goals this year by the council, which kind of bothers me because, that was one of the things one of the purposes that, at least that I believe, when you meet with the council, which we should have met, or the prior council should have met, prior school committee rather, should have met back in November. I know it was a day before the new school committee coming in, but nonetheless, it slipped off, for a month, and I am a little disappointed that the council didn't give us some idea of what, they had in mind for us to a goal to meet. Personally, like I said at the last meeting, for me to really understand the process is, I kind of like to go back and look at apples and see what things change from year to year. And I would ask again that we consider asking Dr. Thornton to give us this year's budget and programs in terms of next year's costs, so we can go, right back and look at, these are the programs, and they were high priority programs and so forth and so on. Okay, if we were to implement those very same programs, no changes in population, no changes in anything, okay? What would it cost to implement those in fiscal year $12? Because, you got inflation, you've got, the new increase now in the teacher's contract, the teachers pay this year, the 1% you didn't have last year, so we know there's going to be some fixed costs just to implement what we have today, notwithstanding anything additional we have.
Well, that's why, in essence, I gave you the sheet to simplify matters. If you were to take off all of my proposed enhancements, it's around $560K. So, Mr. Draper, what are we down to, like a 1% increase, 1.1 and change increase?
Yeah, about 1.25%, I believe.
So just from simplistic, if these all go away, you're still about a 1 and
Because,
1.25.
okay, 'cause that would be because, inflation, you've got an increase in health costs now.
Loaded in there, yes.
And everything else. So basically, our message to the community and the council is, if you want the same programs you have today, it's going to cost you a minimum of 1.25%.
So that's with using a fund balance component to get that number.
So that's actually then greater than. Now, if you didn't use the fund balance, you're talking about 2.5% then, roughly.
I'm proposing we use some fund
Right,
balance.
yeah, but I'm just saying, right. So while using fund balance, you'd be seeking, more money.
And that
Just
would
that status quo, the same number of students, athletic programs, this, that, and,
And also,
everything
just
else.
to realize again, that slide, with the hour going offline, that's the big shift. All the schools are now stretching to meet the new budget because the hour went away. The past 2 years, schools have had a net, if you will.
That was one of the items that I don't want to take this meeting over. That was one of the items that I had to discuss here, because I think if you go to page 13, I think we have to make some modifications, especially based on the revenue stream that we brought up in our discussions with Commissioner Gist today. And one of those, if you look at page 13 in the budget, and you look down near the bottom, you're talking about $2.5 million less in, quote, state aid and federal revenues than you were last year. So that's substantial.
We're on page 13, Bill?
Yeah, on the budget.
Right.
And as you see that, on the other hand, you see, what happened was, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, when we got the ARRA money, if you look at the funding that comes in from the state, I have a chart here someplace, you'll see that the actual state aid, and this is what really concerns me, went down to about $8,000 or $8 million, okay, last year. And what's troubling about that was the fact that when state aid went down, yes, we got it back through the back door, if you may, through the ARRA funding. But the ARRA funding was dedicated to certain programs and so forth and so on. So the thing that concerns me is when we take money that was in the general fund budget for our educational program, and we take it out, and then the state moves the money around, and it goes to ARRA funding, which is more, more specific.
Targeted.
Targeted, yeah. That means our general ed courses, for example, may be affected. For example, we may no longer, in that case, afford, AP courses and things like that. When we lose that band of general money we can spend with, and that's what happened. It's going to be interesting to see if we're going to get the $10.5 million, okay, of state money. But it's interesting the way the state manipulated all this stuff, okay? And as Commissioner Gist said today, as I understand it, and this is something that will affect page 13 again, we're no longer going to have an obligation, for example, for a literacy set-aside.
All those equity, literacy,
Yeah.
preschool vacation, all go on.
Right. So if you go to 13, all of the numbers that are down here revert back up to state aid, and that's going to be about $10.6 million.
Exactly correct.
Yeah, and that's what's happened over, some period of time, and actually, to my way of thinking, it should have been shown like that. But that then does crank up the number you have in the 012 budget, okay, from a revenue standpoint, by whatever the numbers are down here. Okay, so that's interesting to know that, and that's why that concerned me, because if the state pulls back the general ed money, general ed kids are, not necessarily the special ed or the, the focused projects, they're going to get their money, but general ed kids may not get their appropriate share of the budget. So that's something I'm really looking at carefully, and that's why I think I'll send my comments in here to show these numbers going to have to be revised accordingly. I think, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but see, because you no longer have that deficit down here, the $2 million in restricted funds. That's going to shoot up, and that's going to increase the revenue. The 10 point, I think the 10.
10.6?
10.68. I don't have my glass. That's going to go up again by the sum of the numbers that are down here, I think.
If you look back
I hope so.
you look back 2 previous years, you'll see it's not 10.6. Then the money's down below in the middle of the page in the set-asides.
Yeah, if you actually go back with all state aid to, what's the name, it was like 11,600,000. Okay, and
I'm going to jump in here with a question. Dr. Thornton, earlier today in the budget meeting, I asked you if we take half of our surplus or our money that we've had over the years, how is that going to set us up in 2 years when we don't have that anymore?
Right. I'll start that question and have Mr. Draper help me answer it. We're really looking at a couple of things. First, the market in the out years conversation. We knew 12 was the worst year we could foresee some 3 years ago. Therefore, the fund balance conversation starting out for 13, if things still weren't any better on the state and national front, we have more fund balance to apply. So now we're looking at 2014. Mr. Draper, take it from 2014 if you could.
What our goal will need to be over the next 2 to 3 years will be to work on our labor contracts and our cost profile as it pertains to the labor cost and try to get that within what our revenue can be. So if we know our revenue, for instance, by 3050 means we can only get 4% more on tax support each year, that needs to be the limit of how much we can provide for additional labor cost. That's traditionally been where most of the pressure is coming from when it comes to our costs going up. Most of the other lines have been able to stay under control for one reason or another, or trying to make our operations more efficient.
So then just to follow up on a question that the town council asked, I remember Mr. Brennan asked why you weren't using all of the fund balance.
Yeah, to me, if we did that, then we're really out of the game for 2013. I think you want to have a fund balance. I talked to some superintendents that have as little as 30,000 fund balance. That's one bus. That's one special education placement. That's a dangerous place to be. I want to have a reserve for those situations. Most auditors tell you you want 2 to 5% in reserve of your budget. So it behooves us to have a fund balance. I wouldn't want to expend the whole thing and be out there with no net.
I'll go
Madam
down
Chair?
the table again before I come back to you, Mr. Mudge. Does anybody else have a question that you want to ask? I know, Bill, you have lots of
it's
questions.
still on page 12,
Mr. Welch, do you have a
13,
question?
excuse me.
Yeah, if you just tell me what page to go to, I'm looking for, where's our CIP included in the budget?
Page 71.
Thank you. That's, I'm all done.
If you check your email now, you have Mr. Draper's email with the additions.
Could I make a
Yes, we do.
comment on that, ma'am?
I'll
Regarding that, Mr.
Go ahead.
Welch, Mr. Welch, to my knowledge, the budget that's presented here, the 55 million on page 13, that does not include CIP dollars. Monies that are on the page 79, is it, whatever the darn number is?
71.
That's a separate account. okay? Has nothing to do with the $59,321,000 that's being proposed.
Ms. Selb, you have a question? No? Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
So where do the CIP dollars in the budget show up?
They don't. And they shouldn't, the way it, they shouldn't, the way
It's
it's.
not part of what you're going to forward to the town council. It's a separate budget that we run, if you will, we have that sheet, we rank the projects years out. As you know, we get reimbursements from the state, from older projects. Over time, as we have commented, that fund is getting lower and lower as we're not getting it replenished. Historically, in NK, I believe we had approximately $250K per year from the town to put in CIP to keep it going. That hasn't happened as of late. So it's kind of trending down every year, down, I think now, Ned, approximately, what's our CIP balance?
On page 73, there's a total by different funding sources, and those are separate accounts from
Right.
the general operating account. It's around 200,000, just under 200,000 for the capital reserve fund, and then we have the balance on the unauthorized, or the authorized bonds, but the ones we haven't activated yet, which is about $2 million.
So this
Plus
budget,
the bond conversation for the facilities committee, that's the whole.
yeah, I think the answer to the question is, the CIP is not part of the general fund budget that's being presented. It never has been part of that. It's really a separate fund account with the council, handled separately. Now, the mechanics are crazy, I think, but nonetheless, once the council agrees to give us some money, at least they used to, okay, then it would be added subsequently, okay? Now, Mr. Welch, we could have a subline under here of school capital reserve and add that 200,000 and then change that 59,221 to reflect that separate account. And to me, that's what we should do, okay? But it is held in a different bank right now, okay?
Not being a budget person per se, it would make sense to me that if capital expenditures are supposed to be part of the budget, that it should show up someplace.
Yeah, Mr. Welch, let me just illustrate what I just said. If you go to page 13 again,
Yep.
look at capital reserve, okay? And this is going to be one of my questions, because I think we need budget and actuals. If you go quite about two-thirds of the way down the page, you're going to see for 2010, $1.1 million of actual. Now, that was capital reserve, you see? So that reflects what came in after, okay, after what was budgeted. So I would like to see, quite frankly, a budget and actual, because that would show you that. There was nothing budgeted, but once the money was basically, they agreed to, give it to us and spend it, it then shows up in this account. It shows up in the school fund. It's kind of crazy the way it happens, and quite frankly, I think we've been hurt in the past by it. But there's the example, exactly what I was saying, okay? And see, back in '08, you had $668,000. They were not in your school budget. They were in the superintendent's recommendation for CIP expenditures, okay, I believe, okay, which is fine, but they don't occur in the budget as we see it. And that's why I would recommend that we have another line item in here as an expenditure line item, okay, for the CIP expenditure. You see how cuckoo that is?
Well, don't we have, though, in our budget book there, we have the whole explanation of the
Yeah,
CIP and how it is
But
supposed to go.
in terms of an appropriated budget by the council, okay? We had an appropriated budget by the council, okay, not of, you see, in 11, okay, I think that was the appropriated budget. So what's happening, it's kind of crazy here. What's happening is, I would like to see what the appropriated budget was in 10, and then the actuals. Appropriated budget for 11, then actuals, and 9. That'll clearly come out, and it'll be very transparent. You'll see, these changes, okay? And I think we've got the capability, to show that. But
One,
remember, we work on appropriations from the council. And this particular appropriation of 1.1 million, which I think is problematic from a budgeting standpoint, but in a legal standpoint, it was made after our budget was appropriated by the town council.
Mr. Draper, did you wish to respond?
yeah, I just wanted one point of clarification. For FY11, as you can see from that state aid number, there were a lot of things that happened in, fiscal year 10. Fiscal year 10 actuals, you'll see that the state aid unrestricted is
Yes.
$8,674,000.
Right.
There were a variety of things that the state tried to do to avert fiscal issues. One of those was pension reform, of which you can see if we've got a 17% increase that we have to come up with this year, that pension reform was not a long-term solution. So pension reform was used in fiscal year 10 to offset our pension costs. So what we used would be much less than our appropriation because of what happened to state aid. So that's a few issues I'd want to clarify with those numbers for fiscal year 10. That was a very exceptional year relative to what we expected.
Yeah, let me clarify that to my comment, because I referred to that earlier. That, we're taking now, we only have one fund, from state aid. We don't have those little ones that are down here. In fact, that was made in 2012, so that does reflect what we probably will get in 2012 if things are, flat, basically. But as you can see, okay, we actually got in state aid the prior year, $9 million and then $8.6 million. That was it. They actually, took that, to me, represented our general ed money, but they took that away from us and they put it into ERA money, which was targeted money. Okay, the numbers come out basically the same, except now we have general ed money that became targeted money and went down below the line. And that's, let's look at it. That's pretty steep if you look at it. Basically the line's been flat. It's been like $11.6 million, okay, across the line if you really go back and look at this for several years. And you can see, what's happened. And I send you a spreadsheet on the thing, but that's, to me, problematic for general ed, and it's going to be interesting, Dr. Thorne, if we are going to get, the 10.68, and then it is unrestricted money, and it's not, what I'm saying, targeted money.
All we can do is, in November, when we build this, go by what we believe is going to come, and then we watch
absolutely.
and learn as the state unfolds.
Absolutely.
Mr. Draper, in the spreadsheet that you just sent us that was also given to the Budget Committee this morning, the approximate cost of Dr. Thornton's ads, you said, were about $560,000, am I correct?
Correct. And I changed that sheet around a little bit to reflect, without the breakage, it's $560,000.
But the breakage, you estimate at $541,000, am I correct?
Correct, but that's a number that we've typically carried since I've been here in the budgeting process of between 400 and 550.
So could you explain as to why it's higher this year than other years?
We're anticipating, based on the change in age of the overall number of teachers we have, that's going to impact what kind of results we have. We're going to have, we think, some senior teachers that may leave. And when that happens, it's going to make room for some of the newer entrants.
Just to add to that, as you know, last year we passed a early retirement incentive. 10 folks took us up on it last June 30, 7 more going this June 30. We actually knew when we started the budget process, we had 7 folks already declaring. In past budget years, we didn't know anything until April-ish when they declare. So to me, we're already ahead in that we have 7, now I believe 8 we know of already in January. So we're pretty optimistic that we're actually tracking well for breakage.
And usually we ask teachers and staff by April as to who is going to declare, and are we doing that again?
Per contract, they must declare to get a benefit. They can get an extra benefit if they declare by a certain date in the spring, so they do declare.
Was that January 1st or January?
I want to say early April in the contract. I can't remember the exact date.
I have to
April
look at
1.
the contract.
It says, based on seniority and years of service, they get X dollars if
Yeah,
they
I know.
declare by a
For some
date.
reason, I thought it was January, so you had enough planning time to,
That'd be wonderful if we
I mean,
got it earlier.
So essentially, here, what we're looking at is the increases with the breakage will cost about $20,000 more than what we've budgeted. So our main increase in our budget going up is things like our 1% raise, our healthcare costs, and then just normal inflation. Am I correct?
Yeah, pension, 17%, dental at 5%, healthcare at 13%, exactly correct.
Okay. Other question from somebody else?
still page 12?
13.
Oh, I am going to
Or
remind...
13, I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, Bill, to interrupt. I am going to remind the committee it is now, according to this, 9:43, and we did say that since we've been here such a long time today that we are going to break at 10. So I'm going to go on to Bill's question, but just keep that in mind. I think I am finished with the questions I needed to ask, but if somebody else wants to come in after Bill, please do. Okay? Go ahead, Bill.
Again, on page 13, I know what the numbers are, but I personally believe that when we talk, if you go about, down to athletic receipts and rental income, I notice that's been taken out of the budget. I believe that should be shown in the budget, and any rental income that comes in, okay, and any additional gate receipts that come in should go back into the general fund, because the rental income pays for the maintenance and and everything else, and also the gate receipt money goes back into paying for the overall athletic, budget. It goes into the general fund. So I think that money should be not in an enterprise fund like it's shown in the back of the budget, but we should be showing, $70,000-$80,000 more revenue as we have in the past in the budget.
Mr. Draper, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, there's I'll touch on each one separately. The athletic gate receipts are specified as a revenue account per the UCOA standards, so that's a reason we had to put it down there. By school committee policy, we also were directed to take that money and put it towards athletic supplies.
Well, see, what's wrong with that then, okay, is, we have an obligation in our budget that goes forward to the town council to show all our revenues and anticipated expenditures. And if we have an anticipated expenditure for our athletic account, it should show up in our budget. And this budget here, it always has in the past, and there's no reason why it shouldn't in the future. Similarly, okay, the rental. I mean, that's a revenue that we're receiving because of our facilities. There are facility costs associated with those things, and it should be in the revenue stream. It shouldn't be tucked away someplace, and it shouldn't be used for any other purpose but funding the budget.
To address the building rentals, those, I believe, per UCOA will move into the restricted funds category.
I don't check that, but, I don't care what category they're in. They should be shown and obligated in the total general funds for the school. I don't know what the UCOA is doing, but we have lights, electricity, things like that, okay? That money goes to pay for those things. Therefore, it should be in our budget that we present to the town council.
Are you looking on page 13?
The bottom.
Yeah.
The items that were removed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. You can see See, they're putting these things into enterprise funds, and I don't believe that the gate receipts and billing should be in an enterprise fund.
Are you looking under, under general funds?
Well, I'm down at the bottom now. You just asked me. You
Yeah,
see, they're shown,
But, excuse me, Bill.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you be looking at, in the middle of the general funds where it says athletic gate receipts
well, yeah,
and then rental income?
in the middle.
In the middle of general funds.
Oh, yeah,
Top
absolutely.
box.
But there is none for 212. That's my point.
Correct.
Draper, would-
And that has to do
And
with
it should
UCO.
be in
Okay, let Mr. Draper finish, and then you can say what you want to say.
And this goes to, and believe me, I feel your pain. This goes to some of the issues that come up with UCOA and some of our state reporting, which is revenues, because of the classifications we have to follow, have moved around. So you'll see building rentals up at the top, and we always used to track that against our general funds. Now, we're going to be moving that down below, where all those historical years exist up above, but down below showing $67,500 for fiscal year 12. What we've done is an offset to our expenditures in the form of overtime for custodial services. Those custodial expenses have been moved against that offset of $67,500.
Mr. Draper, I'd like to confirm that myself, but I don't care about what the state does in UCA. I care about what's on our budget. We can show anything on our budget sheet we want. The proper place to show that is up here. That's the appropriations we're asking to be, that we expect to come in, just like Jamestown revenue and everything else. We show that in as a revenue stream, and we spend to that account. If it's down in the enterprise fund, that's not appropriated for us to spend. We can get everything we want, but if it's not appropriated, we can't spend it.
So we're going to run two sets of books?
Well, I think that's what they're doing.
But, I mean, we've gone through this now. We were one of the early districts that went into this UCOA thing. And the problem is doing the historical and trying to convert it to the UCOA. That was a problem that we faced right up front. Now, if we're being forced to do something through the UCOA, we can't rewrite the regulations.
Well, I would understand it, but we're not being forced to do anything. What we're being forced to do is show what's our appropriated funding amount, and we can show that in our budget. You see?
As long as the dollar amounts are included, regardless of where they are in the budget, as long as we're not hiding the fact that we've got revenue, which I don't think we are, it's a problem for both sides, as I remember it, the municipal side as well as the school side. This UCOA situation, the conversion has caused problems on both sides, and although the state was supposed to get us information in July and numerous times since then, the most recent meeting has been canceled because it is such a mess. This all falls back on the administration to try and present something that makes some sense using what we've been told that we had to report and the way we had to report it, Bill.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with the reporting. Number one, it's very clear the state law and our town charter says we will identify all revenues and expenditures for appropriation. Those numbers are not in this account, and we have a responsibility to do that. I would also point out, okay, that in our budget here, we have some accounts like for example, what was it in here? Monies, well, the big one was Medicaid at one time, which has been corrected. But we get collections for many things that come into for books, for example. We have revenues that come in for books. Okay, lost books and stuff like that. We have an account in here to show that revenue stream coming in here.
But I think one of the things that we have to look at here is that while it is not on page 13 as to where the revenue is, it is on the supplemental sheet that Mr. Draper has provided us. And I understand what you're saying, that you'd like it on page 13, but we're still showing it just not in the place where you feel it'd be more logical.
No, I'm not really saying that.
Okay, well, let
What
me
I'm
jump to-
saying is, it's got to show up in the town budget for appropriation purposes, and it doesn't show that. So therefore, we have no authority to spend it. You cannot spend monies that have not been appropriated by the town council. For example, Jamestown tuition rates. If they bring in $2 million, that's in the budget and we can spend it. But if they give us $3 million, we can't spend it.
Well, we can spend state money, and that's not appropriated by,
Well, it's, most certainly it is. It's in the budget. It's right up there. It says state revenue.
I'm going to jump to Mr. Thompson.
A couple of things. One is that the people that I, kind of represented when I was running have asked me to help them to lower their taxes, and I told them that I would at least be an advocate for at least one budget submission to the town that would provide that, which would mean a lower spending. So I'm just putting that out there. The second thing is I want to ask about this bottom block on the page. It says enterprise, and it has a bunch of numbers. Are you saying that every piece of money that comes into the school from gate receipts, et cetera, from outside sources, is accounted for in here? For example, this card that I bought, which was $10, and let's say, for example, that they went around and sold, I don't know, 1,000 of these. So there's $10,000. Is that $10,000 somewhere in these figures? Are we tracking all the money that comes into the system?
Whom did you buy the card from?
This was the football team.
If it was purchased as an activity account, it would not be listed here in your revenue sources. Activity accounts are reported through our audit process, but only as a bottom line number. We don't go through the detail level for those. Those are considered fiduciary funds on behalf of the students.
And you call them activity accounts?
Activity account, yeah.
All right.
Now, I'd recommend that everyone look at the financial accounting for local and state school systems. The latest edition is 2009. It's put out by the Department of Education, and it's very clear. And I think you'll see that we're making exceptions that I think Mr. Thompson's hit on here, is that I pay a certain amount of money that goes into being collected for athletics. Somebody puts it in cash, it may show up here. He's got a credit card, and it shows up someplace else. It doesn't show up in these accounts here.
Okay, so it's an activity account, that's what he's saying.
Well, I'm not sure.
Is there a page of that?
It's
Is
an
there a
enterprise
page in this
fund here.
document?
Yes, student activities are a separate issue altogether. Those are collected at the individual schools. They're generally money that goes directly for student activities. They're only recorded on our books in that we tell the auditor how much was collected, how much was spent. We have to prove out that we're utilizing it under the activity accounts use. That was part of what we went through when we did the Kayer and Kasha audit about a year and a half ago, I think that was, or a year ago. So that was part of proving out that process.
Yeah, let me clarify that. The activity fund accounts are those monies that belong to the students. Isn't that right, Dr. Thornton? In other words, they belong to the students. They raise the money for yearbook. They raise the money for, paper, whatever they do in the different schools and so forth and so on. That's an activity fund account. The receipt of gate receipts money is not an activity fund account. Okay? It's a revenue we're receiving, okay, based on the fact we have an athletic event that has been supported by the general fund budget. That's why the money goes back into the general fund. It doesn't go into an activity fund account. Like Mr. Draper, you said an activity fund account. Where would this money be spent then if it's in an activity fund account? Because it's certainly not being spent with the authority or oversight of the school committee, because they don't control activity fund account expenditures, nor do they have an iota to say where the money is spent, because that strictly belongs to the kids.
Okay, Mr. Draper, did you want to respond?
I didn't say the activity accounts were reflected here.
But you said that to Mr. Thompson that his money went into the activity fund account.
I don't know where his money went. I'm assuming that if his card was sold on behalf of the football team and it was a fundraising endeavor, that would have been an activity account.
That certainly is, but as long as it doesn't get him into the ballgame for free, which I think it does.
No,
No, that card does not.
No, I don't think so.
No, that card really
because-
lets you
because
allow
there's-
certain services around town that you can get a discount on.
Right.
Oh, that's great then, and I apologize, because I was thinking, I buy the student ticket every year, right? That money used to go into the Boosters Club, I believe.
Right, we don't sell that anymore.
Oh, the yearly pass?
Correct.
Oh,
What I need to be clear on is those gate receipts would be cash collected when you approach the building and go into a sporting event. If there are fundraising activities, they would either be reflected here if they're going into the general fund, which, for lack of a better word, there's not a whole lot of fundraising we do. It's more of a service-oriented charge or a materials charge, something along those lines. Sale of property, sale of textbooks. Generally, there's something tangible exchanged.
yes,
For the
but-
activity accounts, as Mr. Mudge said, that is correct. That is funds retained on behalf of the students. They're responsible to figure out what they're going to spend the money on, what kind of activities, for instance, classes. Classes will have senior dance, junior dance, those sorts of activities.
I'm going to jump in here. We've had a very good discussion tonight, and I know that we all have a lot more questions. This is just the beginning of our budget talk. It is just about 10 o'clock, and I would be remiss if because I realize that I have not gone to citizens' comments. We've reserved 15 minutes, but I think for the few citizens who are here, that won't be an issue. But I do want to ask if anyone does want to speak before we adjourn for this evening.
We can even refer
All
them
right,
to
not
them by
seeing anyone
name.
leaping up.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's remind, we have another meeting next week on the 25th, in which we will be continuing this discussion. So, and I don't know, did we set the next budget meeting today? I unfortunately had to leave. Okay. That'll probably be done within the next couple of days so that we can advertise and let everybody know as to when that is. But thank you very much and have a good evening.
Great job, Kim.